Imagine being so unhappy with your boss that you leave. You start exactly the same business, following exactly the same strategy. And today, short 5 years later, you do 500 million in revenue and 100 million EBITDA. This is a story about the true M&A and buy and build pioneer. And this is the story of Röko, the Swedish serial acquirer, and its founder and CEO, Fredrik Karlsson. What's interesting about them is it's still a private company, and all the information I'm about to share today is taken from their annual reports and the interviews with Fredrik himself. So it's a fascinating stuff. Today they have 24 companies in their portfolio, which 15 are B2B businesses and 9 are B2C businesses. And they only buy and acquire so-called asset-light companies. Some of the companies which they have in their portfolio today is Denmark-based designer and manufacturer of uniforms and products for students in the Nordic countries. Denmark-based furniture designer offering affordable luxury products globally. Norway-based e-commerce company selling vehicle lighting. UK-based distributor of bearing and spare parts. IT hardware refurbishment company based in Scotland. Denmark-based golf equipment retailer. Denmark-based menswear fashion brand. Sweden's leading independent craft brewery. They have 4 main founders who still own 70% of the whole business. And they manage it all with only having 8 people in their head office. So I put together like 25 notes and lessons from the interviews and from the annual reports which I've read over the years. So number one thing Fredrik really likes to talk about is if you have 30 years of experience doing something, it's easier because you know exactly what to do. Let's not forget that before founding Röko, Fredrik was a CEO of Lifco, a very similar but much larger company in Sweden. And when asked from him, what are the lessons from your 20 years of Lifco that you apply to Röko, he said, if your business has a high margin, you are doing something well because your customers accept paying a high price. There is less risk of customer churn when something happens compared to a low margin business. A company with a history of good profit development also has strong numbers, which secures their future. And other lessons which Fredrik take away from Lifco. At Lifco, our dental business was very focused and they only doubled their profits from 2014 until today, which is like from 2014 to 2023. Whereas in system solutions, which could be anything, they 10x'd their profits. If you're sector focused and the sector is not huge, you run into problems if the sector suddenly gets popular because multiples become too high and you cannot acquire. You will be forced to buy bad companies because there are not enough good deals around. And now with Röko, what they do, when we look at small companies, we try to find market leaders in a niche with moats. Working for others as a CEO is a good for private individual, but I needed to build long-term wealth for my family. Now I have control of my companies. At the age of 40, I was offered a big stake, but I didn't dare because I had young children and I had recently bought a house. I had loans, so I didn't take the opportunity. He didn't share too much about this offer, but I guess it was an offer which he wouldn't make that much money in salary, and most of it would have been stock. So that's probably one of the reasons why he decided not to take the offer. Before getting started, I had only one goal, and that was to get a good team. Then we would see what would happen next. During the past 4 years, Röko has gone from a blank piece of paper to 100 million in EBIT. If you listen today, it would probably get the 30 times multiple on the public market. which means the market value of 3 billion. Did you think it was possible to create so much value that quickly? Again, I tried to get a good team. Then we would see what would happen. No other serial acquirer has ever scaled to 100 million in 3 years. Doing this for 10 years before Lifco and 20 years at Lifco, it's much easier if you have the experience because you know exactly what to do. I find it to be a good idea to go sector agnostic and invest in good companies where management wants to stay and run the business. Looking at their portfolio at Röko, most companies which they acquire, they invest around 55 to 80%. They never buy 100% of the business, and they never buy minority. It's always between 55 to 80, 85. The great benefit of being sector agnostic is it increases your runway, and it also increases the quality because you have a greater choice and are no longer forced to buy bad businesses. This is what he says so many times, that you want to have a very large pipeline of businesses so you never have to buy those bad businesses. Why did you choose to be actively sector agnostic at Röko? Between 2014 to 2022, Lifco increased profits 2x. Demolition and tools was 6x, and system solutions, which was the sector agnostic division, grew 10 times. We didn't have a magic formula for software businesses like Constellation did when we started. It was better to go sector agnostic and invest in good companies where management wanted to stay and run the business. It is not very good if the company lost market share over the 10-year period. This is something he brought out as well. The beauty of the HoldCo business model is that you invest in many companies in different industries. So it doesn't matter if you make a mistake in one company. I discussed this with someone who is more experienced in the business than I am, and he makes mistakes once every 20, but it doesn't matter. I cannot think of a company where we had to clear or inject cash. The mistake you can make is buying a company for 20% more and it goes down 10%, but it still contributes cash and you end up with a slightly lower return on investment. There is no value in having all the knowledge if there are not enough companies to apply it to. That's why they're focusing on the larger markets like Denmark, UK, because if they would only focus on Swedish market, it's not enough. Do you look for recurring revenue, or is it or it's not your major factor? The best businesses we bought at Lifco were involved in dental software. Constellation found the perfect niche to buy small businesses. Aerospace spare parts is another, but very few niches like that. I don't know how Constellation worked until a year ago, nor did I know we were so bad at Lifco. There is always someone bigger and better. It's annoying that another company performed better than we did. You can ask me why we didn't go into software business. Answer was hundreds of companies are trying to copy Constellation. We were too late. And when asked is he open to buy software businesses today, he said, Constellation do many direct deals, but ours are mainly through brokers. We are not interested because we don't see many software companies. And when we do, they're extremely expensive. The private equity comes in and pays 5 times revenue. Constellation have the database and know-how. They can increase profits so they can buy them at such prices. Normally, we can't because they are, again, too expensive. When it comes to brokers, we have maybe 1,000 brokers because there are so many in Europe. We have close relationships with some of them, and others we have only met once. When it comes to risk on the portfolio, the biggest risk is the recession. In 2008, our profits dropped 30% at Lifco. That is the only major risk in a diversified company such as Röko, Lifco, or Indutrade. Indutrade is another very large Swedish serial acquirer. Another risk is if management makes a bad decision, is slow or destroys the culture. A new manager who doesn't understand that it is a centralized culture can ruin the company. It's enough to look at some general things, and I always have a feel for that. I did a private investment in a yacht supplies, which was a tremendous success, and I knew nothing about yacht supplies before acquiring. If I pronounce in a correct way, these are those luxury boats. It's about finding those fanatical people who love their jobs. They stay on if they love their job. And this comes down both on holding company level, but mostly he means in here is the portfolio companies. And when asked, why do you buy 60% or 70% of the company instead of 100%? Management is incentivized to do a good job when we allow them to stay, and they prefer us as a buyer as opposed to those who don't offer that. A business that increases profits every year with a good margin is good for us. It's a challenge to find good successors when the original founder leaves. Big companies are less challenging because they can afford to pay. It's trickier for small businesses who can't pay a proper salary. Buffett buys 100%, but founders always stay. But maybe it's because he's Buffett. My first acquisition was a Norwegian dental company where the owner had 15%, but he stayed on as a manager because he knew his industry and he loved his job and customer. It's all about finding those fanatic people who love their job. And answer again, yes, they stay because they love their job. And there are people like this out there. How do you tell if a founder loves the business? It is more a feeling, and people are honest when they sell. They normally tell us they work too hard and feel like a change in their life. And few people tell a story, but not too many. You have to get that feeling of someone who knows their business. It means you delivered constant growth for several years and are better than your competitors. The numbers prove you are doing something right. Is there a risk at the end of 10-year put call option that the founder leaves? The risk differs per industry. In the beauty business, she wants to stay on, and we have a discussion about prolonging options about 2/3 of the time. There is always a discussion at the end of the period about whether they want to stay or not. When that person wants to leave, do you need a successor in place? In that case, when the person leaves, they were very clear from the start. We recruited a new bad manager, then I recruited another who will hopefully be good. Is that the challenge to find good successors when the original founder leaves? Yes, but big companies are less challenging because they can, again, afford to pay. It's trickier with the smaller ones because you can't really have the money to pay a proper salary. Now, when it comes to acquisition price, the industry average is 8 times EBITDA, and that hasn't changed in 20 years. It has no connection whatsoever to the stock market. What metrics do you look during your due diligence process? We look at financials, specifically profit growth. We increased our minimum margin to 15% because our average is between 18 and 19%. And the interview says, I thought your 10% margin target was slightly low. And Fredrik said, 85% of our opportunities cannot meet the financial criteria. What is that an arbitrage that will always exist? It was existed for 20 years. We bought the company who sells artificial flowers. They had 37 offers, but we won it at normal rates. In order to come up with metrics such as continuous profit growth, EBITDA margin, manager in place, capex under 5%, size and customer concentration, I simply read a book about this. 70% is Buffett and Philip Fisher. He learned the knowledge by simply reading about those folks. The only thing our portfolio companies have to do is to complete our monthly Excel spreadsheet and deposit excess cash. We then decide what dividend to pay out to each company. We had problems with our businesses that increased prices not quickly enough. It's also a cultural thing. Entrepreneurs love to grow their businesses but are not as interested in higher margins as we are, because your cash flow decreases with lower margins. We still have some work to do to get them to understand. The interviewer said, you increased your EBITDA margin target from 10 to 15. Why not higher, say around 20%, like Constellation, for example, which earns 25%? They buy lower margin companies, then increase their profits to 25%. And when asked, why can't you have 20%? My personal experience with manufacturing businesses it's that in a 2009 situation is that you need to begin with 15% operating profit. Otherwise, you will make a loss. Why not have 20% as a hurdle rather than 15%? It's because if you tell brokers you only buy companies with 25% margin, we won't see anything. Why did your margin decline 1% last year? We had problems with our businesses that increased prices not quickly enough. And that's what I said in the beginning as well. It's also a cultural thing, and entrepreneurs love to grow their businesses, but are not as interested in high margins as we are. Again, we still have some work to do to get them understand that. You must operationally change their mind as to how they focus on margin. Yes, you have to be very clear that it's extremely important to keep the margin. When it comes to organic growth, what Fredrik said, it's good enough for us if organic growth is 1%. Even Constellation Software doesn't have high organic growth. It is better to have secure cash flow than high growth. That way you can buy new businesses. And if you have new businesses to buy, there are always available businesses when you're sector agnostic. What if your businesses don't grow and the organic growth remains zero? That is not the problem if you invest their cash flow into other companies. It's good to have shares in HoldCos that are sector agnostic because there is much more opportunity. That's again what he said as well. If Constellation cannot continue buying new businesses, they will have 0% organic growth asset effectively, which is not worth a 30 times multiple, which is now, but it's going to be worth only 15%. Therefore, it's good to have shares in other companies that are sector agnostics like we are. That's what Fredrik said, because there is so much opportunity. Is your model similar to Berkshire Hathaway, but for smaller businesses? Yes. You buy whatever you want and choose good managers like Buffett does. He doesn't get involved in the companies. He is simply a capital allocator. He invests the cash flow by buying public market shares and private companies. We only buy private companies, but he has to invest so much money that he is forced to buy public companies. We prefer private companies because they are much cheaper. Buffett does what I call investment nirvana. He buys a business with good management, then does nothing. When asked, how did you think about optimizing leverage at Röko? When we buy a company, it's usually 3 times EBITDA backed by debt. The rest is cash. And if the materials are right, I don't have any problems making a decision a day on an acquisition. And I can do 10 a day. So the limit would be 3,650 acquisitions. And then he was laughing. I enjoy doing that. I will be like Buffett, who never stops. And it's in his blood. That's what he said many, many times. Would you do Röko until you die? He said, I will do it until I die if I continue to perform. You could be 92 like Buffett and still running Röko. My retirement position will be a member of the investment committee. What age are you looking to retire? I don't want to retire. I want to do the business. It's like Buffett. Otherwise, I will be bored. You have 32 years left. He said, that's perfect. Everything I've been involved in has outperformed the stock market. I kept one bad company who made homes for elderly people. It was heavily regulated with the government involved. I kept it just to remind not to do any business with the government. So that's it about Fredrik from the Röko. What a man, what a business, what a success in a short 5 years. Thanks a lot for listening and see you in the next one.